Before we get into today's scenario, there will be spoilers concerning the plot of Power of the Doctor. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Tardisian Files, a show dedicated to reviewing and discussing aspects of one of the most loved and longest-running British sci-fi shows. This podcast is a non-profit, fan-led series where we pull together sources from all across Doctor Who's extended media, including the show itself, comics, audio stories, and novels. In today's episode, we will be discussing the big plot twist that occurred at the end of Power of the Doctor, where we saw Jodie Whittaker's Doctor regenerate into a very familiar face, David Tennant. This was a landmark event for the show, because while previous actors have returned to reprise their role as a particular incarnation of the Doctor, we've never seen the Doctor take on an old persona as his new persona. Before we go into theorising, there are several elements that we must understand before jumping into the theories. 1. Russell T Davies has confirmed that this is the official 14th incarnation of the Doctor. So, this is not something to do with the timelines, ergo the concept of iterative regeneration and the Gallifreyans known as the interstitials from the novel Engines of War will be ignored. 2. We have seen from the trailers for the 60th anniversary that the 14th Doctor has regained his 10th persona as well as his appearance, so we'll be running with the assumption that this is some sort of regenerative recall to that persona of the Doctor's. 3. These theories will be a mixture of what's been circulating throughout Doctor Who fandom in the media, but I will be explaining them in the context of the evidence that I have found personally. And finally, 4. This list is by no means extensive, so if you do have any theories, please do post them on our social media pages in the comments section under this episode's promo post. Without further ado, let's get into the theories. The first theory that we're going to be looking at is the Symbiotic Nucleus Theory. Being a biologist, my first instinct was to analyse the fictional biological evidence to come up with a plausible explanation. And Time Lord cells all contain a component called the symbiotic nucleus. Various sources in Doctor Who's extended media, and even the 1980s episode The Two Doctors, stated that the symbiotic nucleus is responsible for the Time Lord's biological ability to regenerate. The symbiotic nucleus splits every time a Time Lord regenerates, hence why they can only regenerate 12 times, because the maximum amount of times that the symbiotic nucleus can split is 12 times. Now, even though the Timeless Child story arc confirms that the Doctor is not a Time Lord from Gallifrey, I find it highly unlikely that Tecteun would have had the capability to produce an entirely new cell component just to house the regenerative ability of the new race that she sought to build. Evidence for this is based on the fact that it took a lifetime to even decode the Doctor's genome to understand what allowed them to regenerate. In real life, sequencing genomes of animals and plants that we don't fully understand may take a few decades at a stretch, but with the rate of growth of DNA sequencing technology, the time it takes to decode genomes is currently decreasing. Clearly, this was not the case on Gallifrey, so I think it's safe to assume that the genetic elements that Tecteun infused herself with from the Doctor included a sample of symbiotic nuclei. And we also know from the Two Doctors that the Doctor does have symbiotic nuclei in their cells because he himself states that he possesses them. Now, my theory is that, like the mitochondria in humans, the symbiotic nucleus has its own DNA, and in this DNA, during regeneration, the main nuclei of Time Lord cells sends the RNA messages to the symbiotic nucleus to store the previous configuration of a Time Lord's genome, so that their physical appearance and biological traits for major organs are archived within the symbiotic nucleus. Now, why do I think this? Well, because the Time Lords, like any other living thing, will only have a finite amount of DNA. And because of this, they will only have a certain amount of physical traits for the regenerative process to choose from when their entire bodies rewrite themselves. This is what I believe to be the reason why we've had several Scottish doctors and predominantly male doctors, because those same traits are being recycled during the regenerative process. However, regeneration is also said to break apart the DNA to reassemble it into different physical and physiological configurations. In real life, in humans, DNA can break apart, but the human cell has enzymes to repair these breakages. But having to repair the same breakages repeatedly can cause mutations, which, in severe cases, can lead to cancerous cells. And we know that regeneration can cause illness in Time Lords, one such illness being regenerative dissonance, which is mentioned in the audio story The 11, which features a Time Lord whose previous personalities are not lost when they regenerate, causing them to experience multiple personalities at once, even though their body has renewed itself. So, it may be that reusing and reassembling the same biological traits over and over can also cause cellular irregularities in the regenerating Time Lord. And so, I believe that having the symbiotic nucleus store previous configurations of the Time Lord's DNA, it can help prevent these potential dangers of regeneration. And if we think about it, having this metabolic support system makes sense for something as unstable as Time Lord regeneration, because, considering what we've seen on the main show, and from the extended media, we know that regeneration is a lottery. It is by no means a stable process, and even after the primary regeneration process, the Doctor's body and mind still need time to settle before regaining normal functioning. I believe that by having this regulatory cell component, the symbiotic nuclei may signal the main nuclei of the cells during regeneration to essentially tell them which traits in a Time Lord's DNA have been used and ones that haven't been used for a long time, essentially giving the cell a bit of choice as to which DNA to reactivate and which to not. So, how may this have caused the 14th Doctor to regain his 10th incarnation's appearance and persona? Well, if the physical and neurobiological traits of the 10th Doctor's incarnation were stored in the symbiotic nuclei, what if all the damage suffered by the 13th Doctor from the forced regeneration and the energy blasts from the Master was so great that it caused disruption of the Doctor's cells? This disruption could have caused the archiving of previous traits to go awry, so instead of just archiving the 13th Doctor's traits and sending back a signal of some traits to be reconstructed in the new body, the entire template for the 10th Doctor's incarnation could have been sent to the nucleus of the cell, causing the 14th Doctor to take on the persona of his previous incarnation. Based on the evidence presented, I'm hopeful that this theory is somewhat correct, because not only would it expand regeneration lore, but it would dive very deeply into the biological side of Doctor Who, which can be overlooked at times. However, there are some arguments against this theory. The first one being, the Doctor is not a Gallifreyan Time Lord. Even though regeneration was cloned from them into the Sharbugans, they only took certain traits from the Doctor. So there may be a lot more about the Doctor's unique biology that we don't know about. So the evidence presented in the case of other Time Lords may not be relevant when it comes to the Doctor's regeneration. Additionally, the 14th Doctor also regenerated with a new outfit, very similar to the 10th Doctor's suit. Now, regardless of production notes surrounding this issue, this still indicates that this regeneration had a more psychic component to it, in my opinion, which we know contributes to regeneration, And that brings us nicely onto our next theory as to why the 14th Doctor looks like the 10th Doctor, including his clothes. And that theory is the edge theory. So, while the symbiotic nucleus can explain the physical appearance of the Doctor, it may not fully explain why he has readopted his 10th persona as his 14th so entirely to go as far as to reconstitute an outfit that is clearly a throwback to what he used to wear. The edge theory is the idea that maybe the 10th Doctor's Guardian, who rather conveniently did not appear alongside the other Guardians, hijacked the regeneration. Therefore, this regeneration was purely psychic, hence why we see the Doctor almost regressing into his 10th persona, complete with an outfit that would remind him of his days as the 10th Doctor. Now, why might a remnant of the 10th Doctor attempt to force his way to the forefront once more? Well, for one thing, the 10th Doctor, unlike many Doctors that we've seen before, never actually made peace with his regeneration before he changed. The 9th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, and even the 4th Doctor all had plenty of time to come to terms with their imminent departures, understanding that they were simply moving on with their lives. However, the 10th Doctor's last words were, "I don't want to go." Because we know from Power of the Doctor that the Edge is a metaphysical place in the Doctor's mind, where remnants of their past lives all pass through during regeneration, it stands to reason that the 10th Doctor's Guardian should have been there as well. But the 10th Doctor regenerated twice. During Journey's End, did the 10th Doctor see the Edge? Did he realise what it was? Could he have spent his final days trying to figure out how to preserve his spirit in the Edge, so that he could wait for another complicated regeneration event to make his great escape? Is it possible for Time Lord incarnations to do this? Certainly! Like we said before, regenerative dissonance causes Time Lords to suffer from multiple personalities, where their former personas still exist in their conscious mind. So, if an old persona can remain in a Time Lord's conscious mind, why can a persona preserved inside their subconscious not make its way into the conscious mind and take over? Additionally, we know from Castrovalva that regeneration is said to be a form of telebiogenesis, which, by definition, is a psychic generation of biological matter. So theoretically, an invading persona of the Doctor's mind could easily have exerted their physical influence over the regeneration to reform the 10th Doctor's body and take over as the existing personality of the Doctor. Additionally, we know that at least part of the regeneration process is influenced by the Doctor's subconscious, as we know that they subconsciously chose to take on Caecilius's face in their 12th incarnation to remind themselves that they save people. This would also explain why the Doctor now doesn't seem to know why he looks like his 10th incarnation, because the 10th Doctor could have hijacked the regeneration purely from the Doctor's subconscious mind. This would be consistent with the Doctor's previous regenerations, as they have never shown to have conscious control over their regenerations. However, there is some evidence against this theory. Like with the Symbiotic Nuclei Theory, the Doctor is not a Gallifreyan Time Lord. Gallifreyan Time Lords such as Romana, and even Proto-Time Lords such as River Song, Brooke, and Lake, could consciously control their appearance, but the Doctor may not have this same control over their regenerations because they are from a different universe entirely, and could potentially have a completely different brain structure. Even though the ability to regenerate was cloned from the Doctor into the Time Lords, I find it more likely that even though the ability to regenerate was cloned from the Doctor into the Time Lords, I find it more likely that either the Shibugans originally were psychic, or the Time Lords evolved over centuries to become psychic, rather than it being an attribute that they gained purely from the Doctor's DNA. This is even consistent with the Proto-Time Lords, because River Song was part human, and all human beings, as stated in the Fires of Pompeii, have latent psychic abilities, so being part Time Lord could have potentially boosted River and her siblings' psychic abilities. Based on this, it seems more likely that the psychic component of regeneration, for those of Gallifreyan heritage, is merely the result of them developing psychic abilities independently from their regenerative abilities. Additionally, if this is the 10th Doctor's spirit that has possessed the 14th Doctor's body, it is odd that he doesn't remember it, though that said, it could just be a side effect of post-regenerative stress. Now, these theories both assume that the regeneration of the 13th Doctor into the 14th was purely down to the Doctor themselves. But what if there was someone else behind the scenes? This brings us to the Celestial Toymaker Theory. Now, this theory brings us to one that establishes a strong link between Power of the Doctor and the 60th anniversary special. For those unaware, the Celestial Toymaker is widely believed to be the villain of the upcoming 60th anniversary special in 2023. Assuming that this is correct, this means that the Celestial Toymaker, played by Neil Patrick Harris, is likely going to be taking revenge on the Doctor for defeating him in his second incarnation and for destroying his pocket universe known as the Toy Room. Now, the Celestial Toymaker belongs to a race of beings from the pre-universe, which came before the known universe, just like Fenric, the Elder Gods, possibly the Eternals, and the Ancient Knights. Like them, he belongs to a group of beings known as the Great Old Ones. When the Doctor last met him, the Toymaker's whole existence revolved around abducting people and crafting entire worlds within the Toy Room, ones that often contain familiar settings for his victims, containing deadly games for them to try and escape from. Obviously, these games were rigged in the Toymaker's favour so that he could trap his victims. But with the Toy Room gone, the Toymaker has had to change his tactics. This theory speculates that the 60th anniversary will see the Doctor trapped inside one of the Toymaker's elaborate games, designed to keep him on his toes whilst the Toymaker simultaneously invades Earth with his army of sentient toys. Evidence for this theory includes the fact that the Doctor has been returned to a persona that he recognises and has landed on Earth under siege, which is very normal for the Doctor. Additionally, we know from the trailer that the trouble finds the Doctor that the trouble the Doctor finds himself up against appears to be converging around Donna Noble, who also appears to be having some sort of realisation that a huge chapter of her life is missing. Both the Doctor and Donna are in a situation that is familiar to them, but is rigged against their favour, as the Doctor has to stop the invasion whilst avoiding Donna. But Donna is at the centre of the invasion, which keeps reminding her of her time in the TARDIS, so how can either of them win? Now, this is entirely within the Celestial Toymaker's modus operandi. He is a great old one, with the ability to alter reality, hence, manipulating the Doctor's regeneration is hardly a difficult task for him. Additionally, Neil Patrick Harris's character is seen in the trailer saying the words "worldwide premiere," indicating that this is a plan that has been put into motion for a while now and is slowly coming to fruition. However, despite this very interesting concept, there are a few holes in the theory. The first being that we don't actually know if Neil Patrick Harris is actually playing the Toymaker or just a villain inspired by this classic villain. And even if he is playing the Toymaker, there is a lot of conflicting accounts with the Toymaker's power, so even though he may be behind the invasion, he may not necessarily be behind the Doctor's regeneration. He might just be taking advantage of the 14th Doctor's incarnation to keep him busy and prevent him from getting involved and stopping his invasion plans. That said, this theory has a lot of credibility because the Toymaker's character was deliberately kept mysterious, like the other great old ones, giving Russell T Davies a lot of creative leeway when it comes to writing the story arc for the 60th anniversary special. And I, for one, am very, very interested to see which of these theories, if any, proves to be the most correct. And that brings us to the end of theory time. So those were 3 of the most circulated theories, and the first of which is being my own. I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely rooting for the Symbiotic Nucleus Theory. Now, with the 60th anniversary looming, time will only tell which of these theories is correct, but for the time being, we've definitely been left somewhat in the dark. So, if you have any more suggestions or any more theories, please drop them on our Instagram page in the comment section for this video. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like and tell your friends. You can check out some of our other materials on Spotify, our Anchor page, and you can get updates on the podcast at our Instagram page, at Tardisian Files Podcasts. As always, join us next time for more episodes of Tardisian Files. See you then, everyone!